Hi, it's Matthew Reed here with another how to repair pendulum clocks video. Firstly, apologies for the handheld microphone. I've had a bit of a malfunction. You may have noticed on YouTube recently the increase in interest in videos about tools and toolboxes and the kinds of things that people carry when they work on site. So I thought I would get on that bandwagon and do my own. So for the past 25 years or something like that, as a clock repairer and conservator more lately, I've been traveling in institutions and in my own self-employed practice and evolving the kinds of things I take with me. So that's what this video is. I developed this list here, which you can download for free from my website and use it as you will. And we're going to run through that list, and I'm going to try and give you some kind of explanation why I use those particular things. Now, of course, this is not at all definitive. In fact, it's very evolving, and also it really varies from job to job. So as always, I would love to have your feedback and know what your thoughts are and particular favorites that you take when you go on the road with your repairs. And we will see you at the end of the video. First off, here's our list. As I said, you can download this. The web address is at the beginning of this video. And first we need something to put our tools in, and I use one of these metal framed or fabric covered tote bags rather than a toolbox as such, because well, a few reasons, but one is that it's just easy with this kind of flap on top of it to get things in and out as you are on the go, and secondly because it's really better in some of the places I travel. You don't want to be kind of clanging into things, and so the fabric, sort of a slightly softer fabric cover, gives you an advantage there a little bit. So I use this Facom branded tote bag thing, and this is the third one of these I've had for 3 different places I've worked, and yeah, I think it's okay. It's not too big, pretty easy to carry even when it's full of tools. It's got quite a few internal kind of pockets, maybe not quite enough, and I know there's a lot of choice with this kind of thing now, but anyway, this is where we're at, and this is where we're going to keep our tools. Back to the top of our list, we've got 3, 2, 1 blocks. So this is a kind of name I stole from engineering, where you have ground metal blocks that measure 3 inches by 2 inches by 1 inch. And so quite a few years ago, I thought that would be a good idea to have a similar thing just made out of wood, which I paint grey to go with my photographic background. So these are used for things like propping up the seat board on a long case or tall case clock when you've taken the movement out of the case. So I pack a couple of these in my bag. Next, we've got blue tissue on a roll, the kind of thing you buy from catering supplies, and pretty self-explanatory. We have now blued pivot steel, and I'll talk about blued pivot steel and brass wire together only because I store them in the same drawer. So blued pivot steel is a horological specialist material that's typically used for replacing the pivots on clock wheels or arbors. On site, I use it for things like making little punches, punching out reluctant pins and so on, or maybe for wire springs on mantle clocks and French clocks, that kind of thing. Brass wire, again, a sort of slight horological speciality, hard drawn, is used basically for making springs. It's used for filing into rivets, and you can make an oiler from it if you forgot yours. So blue pivot steel and brass wire, they're still available, and you can pick them up as kind of like new old stock off from workshops online. Our hammer, I prefer the small watchmakers type brass hammer. This one happens to be branded Bergeon, but there are many others on the market. I would personally go for one that hasn't got a round section handle, because they tend to kind of turn round in your hand. And this one, I've had it a long time. It was one of the first things I bought when I kind of started out in horology. Sometimes I take this steel hammer with me as well, but on the majority of cases, it's this watchmaker's hammer. It's got a good bite with it being made out of brass, not too slippy, perfect tool for the job. So brown, what I call masking tape. This is brown paper tape. Not quite sure whether it's officially masking tape or not. This is by Kite brand, which I find decent quality and would be used for something like holding down veneers as they're being glued, or moldings, that kind of thing. So used as a masking tape, and obviously many other uses as well. So brown paper tape, very useful. My camera setup looks like this. Sometimes I take a macro lens as well, which is useful if you're photographing jewellery or watches, or want to get right in there with the detail. I've got the ring light on there, which we'll talk about in a short while. And of course, a lot of people use their phone as a camera, which I do too, perfectly fine. But I actually enjoy the photography as much as anything, and I like to make it part of the kind of service I offer, although I'm not a professional photographer. Spare battery and charger, of course, and equally importantly, don't forget your memory card. Collets. These are not the lathe type collets, but the horological thing that's essentially a washer that might go between the pin that holds the hands on a long case clock and the minute hand. There's just one example. I've got versions here that are brass and some that are steel, and yeah, not used every time I go out, but when you need one, they're pretty essential. In the workshop, I'd probably make them bespoke where I can, but for on the road, this box is absolutely great. So computer and charger and all that kind of stuff, pretty self-explanatory, and here we see it in action. Cotton tape. So cotton tape is often used by bookbinders. It's sometimes called book tape or archival tape, and it's really useful for tying things like a trunk of a long case clock, the door, things like that, and also for cleaning as well, for cleaning out larger bearing holes and so on. So there are 3 diameters that are commonly available, or at least through PEL, which is Preservation Equipment Limited, 6mm, 16mm and 10mm, I think, of which I've run out. So I always take a roll of cotton tape. Cutters, sometimes known as cutting pliers, and it would be lovely to take 20 pairs, but these are my sort of favourites at the moment for general use. They're the Knipex piano wire cutters. They're relatively slim for the power or the ability that they've got, so they are a real favourite at the moment. For smaller, finer work, I use these Lindstrom semi sort of flush cutters. You can cut small pins, soft pins with these, but obviously you don't want to cut anything too hard, otherwise it will damage them. They're quite expensive, but if you look after them, they last kind of a lifetime. And then more for sort of old time's sake really, I sometimes or often take a pair of these Lindstrom end cutters and don't use them that much, but they're a beautiful tool. Here we have the charger for my camera ring light batteries, and then extension cables and so on. So in institutions, some places prefer you to use your own stuff, and I'd always, if I can, rather be kind of self-contained. I like this Permaplug, I think it's called, brand, because of the colour, seems decent quality. I'll take an extension cable and a 4-gang extension as well. The remember that in the UK for site work you need to have this stuff PAT tested, which is portable appliance testing, and that has to be redone every year. Eyeglass. So this is a watchmaker's type eyeglass. I take a couple of these relatively inexpensive aluminium ones along, and my eyeglass of choice is a clip-on because I wear spectacles normally. Bergeon Airy model. You can get them in different magnifications, both left and right eye, and they last about 5 years before they fall apart, but they are quite expensive to buy, but they're good value in the kind of long term. They're a nice quality horological product. Now we move on to files. So as always, it would be lovely to take more, but I try and keep the number down to 3 or 4 different files, again depending on the duration and type of job. So one that I always pack is a round section needle file, or in this case actually an escapement file with a square section handle. A 3 square file, which is triangular in section, which has got one of the sides of teeth completely stoned flat. And this means that you can file into sharp corners, and I use this for draw filing taper pins before I fit them to make them grip as well. And thirdly, this is a bit of a favourite again. It's a 4-inch barette file, and with a Python brand handle on it. And again, obviously the kind of advantage of a hand file, but it's tapered and the sides are tapered, so you can file into sharp corners with it. So that's it for files, just the 3, and that enables me to do the vast majority of the work I have to. Flux brush. So flux brush or glue brush, as you'll sometimes see them described, these are a natural bristle brush, and they're sold as being disposable, but of course I like to wash them out where I can. Great for applying glues, and I take a couple, one with the longer bristles and one that's been cut down to use as a kind of scrubbing brush for cleaning out pinions and things like that. So yeah, big fan of these natural bristle brushes with the wooden handles. You buy them in a dozen or something like that at a time, and they're relatively inexpensive. Keeping on the theme of brushes, we move on to Glasgow brushes. So Glasgow brush is a horological staple. Every clock workshop has got some, and there are 4 hardnesses. That's how stiff the bristles are. The one that typically turns up in clockwork is a number 2, like these here. They've all had a good life. And then we've got a number 4, which is a goat hair, much softer for watch work and that kind of thing. So I always throw in a couple of Glasgow brushes. And then on to nitrile gloves. So in the museum and heritage type domain, you will always be expected to wear nitrile gloves when you are handling anything metal to prevent corrosion from fingerprinting, and it's just also kind of part of the uniform as well. So I've totally got used to wearing gloves over the past couple of decades. People say, you know, about issues of sensitivity and so on. I don't really find there's a problem with them because you're usually using pliers or tweezers, that kind of thing. So these are a sort of eco-rated nitrile glove. Not quite sure what the eco credentials are, but there you go. These are the ones that I'm using at the moment. So the first of our glue type products, this is a thing called Paraloid B72, which is a synthetic glue that is broadly reversible, which is why it is liked in the museum and heritage world. So you can use it as a lacquer, as a varnish, as a consolidant, or as an adhesive. And it's basically undoable with acetone and other solvents. This is a pre-mixed version. You can buy sort of granules and make your own. This is made by the brand HMG. So really useful for things like veneers and loose moldings and stuff like that. In terms of greases, I typically carry two. So I'm a big fan. My kind of latest thing really is this palette stone grease by Mobius. So it's number 9415, and this has got a very specific application, but I actually use it for quite a lot of areas where you want a very sort of liquid grease. So something like a hammer stop, lifting pins, that kind of thing. I find it is really good. It's super expensive, but you need such a tiny amount in the long run. It lasts a long time. Then I've got the 9501 blue synthetic grease, again from Mobius, and this is kind of for me a more general purpose grease, which I use less frequently. Jeweler's clamp. The jeweler's clamp is a holding tool. It's made out of wood, and it clamps the work by a wedging action. The double-ended tool has got jaws that are lined with leather or suede or felt or something like that, and it's really great for holding fragile components, for filing or shaping where a pair of pliers would damage them. So it's a surprisingly kind of subtle, really, although it's just a kind of couple of pieces of wood pivoted together. So jeweler's clamp, sometimes called a ring clamp, is very useful to take with you. Lab coat, I do carry a lab coat most of the time, so this is useful if you're working in a kind of conservation lab or a studio environment with other conservators. It's obviously keeps everything clean, and it's part of the uniform. In the kind of more public fronted stuff, I tend not to wear it as much. It really depends, but lab coat's a useful thing to have in that sort of broader professional environment. The letdown tool. The letdown tool is a really essential bit of kit if you're working on spring-driven clocks where you want to safely take the power off the mainspring if you want to partially or fully disassemble the movement. So it's a plastic handle that basically spins in your hand under control, and a set of interchangeable keys of different sizes to fit different size winding squares. So letdown tool is good if you want to work on spring-driven clocks. Lighting. Lighting is kind of important to me because a lot of the places I work are quite gloomy, because light is degrades a lot of materials like paper and textiles and so on, not clocks so much. So yeah, often the rooms I'm in are dark, and so I take my own LED lights. This is a sort of a kit that comes in a bag with 3 tripods, 3 lighting heads, and 3 chargers. It's made by a company called Viltrox, and as you can see, the lights themselves are dimmable, and they're also adjustable for color temperature as well, which is nice. Now the tripods are a little bit flimsy and I have to keep repairing them, but overall this kit has been really total kind of godsend. Really good value for money. Wouldn't be without it nowadays, and it means again that you can be quite independent of the place where you're working because they don't have to provide lights and things. So yeah, the lighting kit is now a permanent part of my traveling toolkit, and here we see it in use. Now we have lines and ropes. So a lot of clocks have weight-driven clocks of either hemp or textile rope or natural gut lines, and these obviously need replacing from time to time. And as much as that is often workshop work, sometimes I'll undertake that on the road, depends on the overall condition of the clock and so on. So yeah, I carry some rope and the necessary tools to fix it together, and an assortment of natural gut lines for 8-day long case clocks and things like that. The loop is a jeweler's tool, and I really only carry this again for kind of sentimental reasons from the old days when I used to deal a bit more with jewellery. So it's a kind of standard Zeiss 10x loop, really actually a nice bit of kit, but really only useful if you are looking at things like gemstones and hallmarks and so on. But I have it, it's nice to take, and it's a reminder of times from the past, really, I suppose. Mini grip bags are often, I think they're called zip bags. They're little polythene bags with a resealable top on them. If you remove components from an object, or you find things kicking around that you don't know where they've come from, then it's often useful to have a few little bags that you can put things into and write the inventory number on. So we'll tackle oil, which is like one of the most important things. Oilers and the oil stand all together. So my two primary oils for domestic clocks are Mobius D3 and Mobius D5. So the D3 is your kind of all-round train wheel pivot lubricant, and then D5 is a bit heavier grade, bit higher pressure for things like fusee arbors and barrel arbor pivots and so on. I'll also carry some Mobius 9010, which is a synthetic oil that's used for platform escapements and watch type mechanisms. So if I take a balance out and add the lubrication, then I'll use 9010 on the balance pivots. I've also got some 9020, which is a slightly heavier version, which I've had about 300 years, so I think that's probably about due for retiring. For applying the oil, I use the old-fashioned, what we used to call Triumph oilers. These ones are retailed by Bergeon. The two thickest ones, I think, the green one and the yellow one, are the ones I use. And I heat up the little steel blade and bend it by sort of 15 or 20 degrees or something, and it just makes it a little bit easier to use and apply the lubricant in awkward places. I've also got the black ones, which are the very fine ones for watches, but use those less frequently. And here's my oil stand, which is pretty old-fashioned, with the glass cups, a metal base. They make a very similar one nowadays, but I think it's all made out of plastic, and had it a long time. Obviously you can put 4 different grades of oil in there, so that gets me by, and it gets cleaned out at the end of every session. So back to brushes. I call these Omega brushes, not because of the watch brand, but because of the Italian brush manufacturer of the same name. This is a kind of varnish brush which I use for vacuum brushing of clock cases and things. Get quite dusty, pretty stiff bristle there. And this one, which is a softer bristle for maybe more metal surfaces. And then thirdly, not an Omega brush in this case, but a goat hair brush for very sort of fragile surfaces like gilding and so on. So take those 3 with me, and you might also want to take a kind of regular paintbrush, natural bristle 3/4 inch paintbrush, but it's a good idea to put tape on the ferrule to prevent it from scratching. Pegwood is an horological staple. It's typically used for cleaning out the bearing holes when the clock is taken apart. There's also some pithwood in here, which is useful for soaking up excess lubricant and so on. We've got the odd popsicle stick, and then we've got this sort of pegwood made out of cornice or dogwood, which is useful for the larger size pivot holes. So pegwood is always going to be there. Now, pencils. Pencils are a little bit problematic. I used to like this Tombow brand of their mono pencil. I think they call it Mono 100 or something. Really, really sweet pencil. I've had these about, as you can see, sort of 25 years. And then people said and encouraged me to try the Blackwing make, which I did. And I didn't really get on with those that much. So there's a school pencil and a Venus pencil there, and then we've got a sort of graphite stick type 6B pencil, which is actually useful as a dry lubricant. So if you've got a component like star wheel and jumper, then you might want to use that instead of oil to prevent it from sticking. So there we are on pencils. If you've got any recommendations for a new brand to try, then please let me know. Phone charger, pretty self-explanatory. And then we've gotten our photographic scales. So photographic scales are really important part of my sort of record keeping. Again, you can get them on my website. They're a free download. Print them at 100% scale for obvious reasons, and then you cut them out. And what they enable you to do, in addition to kind of giving a rough scale of the thing that you're photographing, is to record things like inventory numbers, where you took the photograph, and the date on which you took the photograph. I take hundreds, thousands of photographs, and without these scales it would be almost impossible to keep track of what things were and when I saw them. Particularly when you revisit the same collection year after year, it's nice to be able to see the kind of progression. So every new thing I look at, I make a photographic scale, write the date on it, and as you can see, it can be incredibly useful. Piercing saw or jeweler's saw is not something I use that often on the road. It's obviously a workshop tool primarily. I used to tape the spare blades to the back of the handle, but they got them broken, so I take a plastic sleeve with spare blades in it now. And in combination with that jeweler's peg thing, the jeweler's clamp, sorry, that we saw earlier, piercing saw can be incredibly useful. I don't take a bench vise, I don't take a piercing saw table, so you need some way to hold work that you are cutting. Pin vise. So here we have a sort of motley selection of pin vices, and I have gotten to like this one. It comes with 3 collets and covers 80% of the sizes I'm ever going to need. So for filing wire, holding taper pins, that kind of thing, perfect. For the slightly larger components, such as studs in the front plate of a long case clock, I've got this wooden handled pin vise. Don't quite know where I picked that up. And then if you want to do drilling, you might want to take an Archimedean drilling stock as well. So with these 2 pin vices, I'm able to cover the vast majority of work. Pliers, again, we would like to take 20 pairs, but the practicalities of it are that I try and keep it down to 3-ish pairs. That is these Lindstrom sort of fine nosed ones. A similar thing by Lindstrom with the plastic dipped handles, which I prefer to the more modern ones with the chunky handles on them. And then these flat nose pliers by Wilkinson, which are great for manipulating springs or using as a kind of strong pair of tweezers. Followed up by these modern and quite clunky but very useful parallel action pliers with brass jaws. And the brass jaws are great because they don't slip so much and they're a bit softer on the materials you're holding. And the parallel action pliers can be used as a kind of spanner on things like bell nuts and so on, where you don't need that much torque. The puffer or air blower thing is useful primarily for the camera, I guess. Sometimes if we're working on watch type mechanisms, not that much use in clockwork, but yeah, it's good for the camera, so I take one of these with me. Shop rags or cotton rags. On the road I tend to use new stuff and then wash it and use it in the workshop once it's been used, and not a lot more to it really than that. It's just plain old white cotton rag, and it's yeah, obviously very useful, kind of essential to have in any workshop situation. Back to our paperwork. So reporting forms or data sheets are a prompt. Again, it's on the website. Download it and have a use it, modify it for your own use. Where this really comes into its own is when you're looking at new collections or collections that are new to you, and you've maybe got 6 or 8 clocks to get through over a period of time, and you want to make sure that you don't forget the obvious, like how heavy were the weights, or did it have a winding key, or was there a case key, or even, you know, was the dial signed, that kind of thing. So in that situation, I find a data sheet really useful. It's just the prompt. You just go down in a few minutes and you gather basic information about the object that you're working on. A ring light, which we've seen this already, fits on the front of my camera. Again, if you're working in gloomy conditions, particularly with macro photography where you need plenty of light around the object, then these LED ring lights are really cool. What I would say about this particular one by Godox is it's great, it's dimmable, but it's not adjustable for temperature, color temperature, and you know, I'm not complaining. It wasn't massively expensive, but if I were going to get another one, then that is a bit of a sort of functionality that I would like. Rodico is a proprietary brand or name for a cleaning agent or material for watches primarily. So you'll see this on in the watch industry. You can use it to clean jewels and fingerprints of things and gather up little bits of dust, really good for that, or holding small components like jewels. So it looks like blue tack or plasticine, but it isn't. It's a specialist cleaning product, and again, you can obviously use it for holding a screw on the end of your screwdriver under certain circumstances, but it's for cleaning. As far as a rule is concerned, I'm really committed to this Mitutoyo brand, chrome, matte chrome finish, beautiful quality, and what more is there to say? I don't think there's a need to have any other brand personally. Scalpel. So a scalpel is obviously a bit different from a craft knife, although I suppose there is some crossover there. And I use this Swan Morton brand. Now, unfortunately, they changed from nickel handles to stainless steel handles, presumably for the sort of medical reasons. But the design is the same, and it's been the same for years and years and years. So I take at least one of these handles and a packet of spare blades with me for smaller cutting operations. Scissors, we already saw these and don't need to explain how useful they are. Try, if you can, to keep them not covered in glue and not when they've just been used to cut a piece of spring steel. In terms of screwdrivers, I guess we all have our favourites, and my sort of favourites have changed a lot over the years. I now use these relatively inexpensive kind of 1980s ones, and the reason I like these is because the tips are not hardened. So unlike a modern screwdriver where the end is often hardened material, you can file these to fit the screws of historic clocks. Also, the non-hardened steel is a bit softer and therefore it's not quite as slippy as the hardened tips. So I take these flat bladed ones and maybe a thinner, longer one, or a cabinet screwdriver, some watchmaker screwdrivers for platform escapements and things, and then an intermediate sized clockmaker screwdriver, sort of this brass one here. And then not shown here is a PZ2, so that's posi drive, size 2 in the UK, for the fixings. Clocks don't have them, but the fixings, like, you know, fixing the thing to the wall, often does, so it's useful to have that as well. A scriber is something I've only relatively recently added to the tool list, and I don't use it as a scriber, as in for marking out new work on the road. What I use it for is for a sort of like pushing things, because it's a nice slim tool for accessing ratchet clicks and that kind of thing. So a little bit scratchy, but very useful tool for accessing awkward to get at components. Very occasionally I'll use a small drill. You get a pin that's broken off or something and you can drill it out quite easily by hand normally, hence the Archimedean drill stock. Might use these on the road a couple of times a year, that's all, but you know, when you want to use a small drill, nothing else will quite fit the bill, so I chuck those in as well. Kind of in association with the scissors, we've got what I call a snap-off knife. I think this is a Stanley 1018, something like that, with a metal handle, so it feels like quite a nice quality tool. Obviously very useful for cutting things like plastisol foam, small bits of wood and things like that. So yeah, that is just one of those kind of go-to tools that I wouldn't be without. In terms of solvents, I don't do a massive amount of solvent cleaning when I'm out the workshop, but it's useful to have something like isopropyl alcohol, which I think they call rubbing alcohol, for general cleaning. For instance, if the oil stand needs cleaning, that kind of thing. And I put it in an Nalgene, I think this is 250ml bottle. So if you've got any solvents, make sure that they've got the appropriate Koch pictograms on them so people know what's inside. And when not in use, keep them in a flammable cabinet or a flammable store, and try not to leave them on site overnight. Spanner, adjustable. Some people don't like them, and for me, for things like seatboard bolts, there really isn't anything else that's going to do the job. Those parallel action pliers are quite good, but I carry two adjustable spanners, typically a 4-inch and a 6-inch. So this is a tool that needs a bit of an upgrade. It's my spring balance. So I weigh the weights of weight-driven clocks with this in order to determine whether the clock is overdriven or not, or even underdriven. It's just a bit of data gathering. So this is a very kind of vintage type spring balance, not that much resolution, and I really should invest in a new one, so that will be getting a bit of an upgrade sooner or later. So if you know of a good brand for that, then please let me know in the comments below. Steel wool, or wire wool as it's sometimes known. Typically you would use the 4 noughts grade for small cleaning operations. Sometimes the inside of a French clock bezel gets corroded, and you can gently take some of that corrosion off with your steel wool, and yeah, really useful. Just be careful in storage because it can burn quite easily, particularly if it's got oil or wax on it, so dispose of it responsibly, and again keep it in a safe in a sealed container away from sources of ignition that can include something like batteries. Step ladders. I used to borrow step ladders on site. Some places don't like that, and because of the training and liability perspective, and some step ladders you can find are pretty ropey, wobbly things. So I bought a pair of my own. These are by TB Davis, and they're EN131 in this country rated, and they're super stable, worth every penny, and wish I'd bought them years ago. So a great investment pair of sturdy step ladders. Stud lock is the first of our get out of jail free cards, for obvious reasons, you know, 18th century clocks with strip threads and so on. Some people don't like using stud lock on historic work. I don't have a problem with it, particularly in this kind of working on the hoof sort of environment. Different grades, obviously low strength, medium strength, high strength, etc. So your medium strength stud lock is your kind of go-to product. In a similar vein, we've got super glue, which is your second get out of jail free card, and try not to stick your fingers together. This particular brand, I notice it says precision on it, so that must mean it's made for gluing clocks together. Super glue's got to be in there. Amazing how many times it gets used. Cotton swabs are useful, obviously, for applying small amounts of solvent or for mopping up excess oil. I'm a bit lazy, so I buy these pre-made ones by Tex Wipe, I think it is. Get them from Preservation Equipment Limited here in the UK, and I just use like 3 or 4 a day every single time I go on the road. Kind of in the manner of the stepladder, I now almost always take a folding table with me, even if the institution will lend or set out tables and so on. You want to make sure that your table is safe, not too wobbly, isn't going to collapse. And B, again, for me, I just like to be self-contained. So I bought this table from GoPack, and it's got a grey top, so it's great for photography, matches my photographic background paper, lightweight, and you can just keep self-contained with your workstation. You can see here I also put a transit blanket on the floor to stop any bits of oil or anything dropping down there, and just to try and keep everything together and looking neat. So folding table, really useful. A tape measure is pretty self-explanatory. One with metric and imperial graduations is obviously the way to go, so tape measure is in there too. Taper pins are, again, an horological staple. Every clock workshop in the world has got them. I use these so-called universal ones, which are obviously not universal because there are 3 different sizes. So there are what I call fine, medium and heavy, or something like that anyway. And between those 3 sizes, I cover 99% of all the work I'm likely to do. You might sometimes want brass ones if you're working on a pocket watch or something, but for domestic clocks I buy these so-called universal pins, and I think they're really great. Acid-free tissue is something you will find the whole time in the museum and heritage world, and it's good for packing, for resting delicate objects on, like clock glasses and things, and you can use it for cleaning as well. So I buy the Kite brand one. Again, it's kind of a medium priced acid-free tissue. You can get some super expensive ones and some really cheap ones, and this one seems to do the job for me, and you buy 500 sheets or something and it lasts for ages. So acid-free tissue by Kite brand. Back to the adhesives, and again for wood, this Titebond liquid hide glue is nice because again it's a sort of reversible adhesive, and it's analogous to the kind of historic adhesives that furniture would have been made out of with animal glue. So yeah, it's great for gluing down veneers and little bits of loose moulding and so on. I'm not a furniture conservator, so I don't get involved in anything major, but it's just nice to have this so you can offer and say, do you want me to glue this veneer down before it kind of gets caught and the situation gets worse? And liquid hide glue is the way to go. Back to my photography needs. I've had this Manfrotto, I think it's 055, can't quite remember, model, and the 141 head on the tripod. And I think this is a really great compromise between weight and stability. For a studio, you might want a heavier tripod, particularly if you're doing video work. But for my thing, where you're lifting the thing up 20, 30, 40 times a day and moving it, then this is, I think it's a really great compromise. Don't forget your tripod plate that the camera fixes onto. Tweezers, every watch and clockmaker has got a box of them, I guess. And I actually prefer the brass. They're relatively inexpensive brass ones. You can file the tips. They're non-magnetic. They've got a bit of grip to them with them being brass. For watch work, you might want finer steel ones, but for domestic clocks, really like these inexpensive brass ones. Microcrystalline wax is useful again as a cleaning sort of agent, for waxing things as well. Sometimes it's very useful to have around, but again, when you are storing it, store it in a chemicals cabinet or similar, and just be aware that it is of course flammable, being white spirit based. These low angle wooden wedges I sort of discovered about 10 years ago, and I'm pretty much addicted to them now. They're obviously brilliant for wedging up long case clocks that are rocking slightly, or keeping them secure against the wall, or putting onto seat boards or furniture that's wobbling about. Yeah, the low angle wedges, I always carry a few in the toolbox, and every single week I use them for something. And last but not least, we've got these what I call write on anything pens, and these are IdentiPen brand, I think. Yes, they are, and they're double-ended, so one end's fine, one end's a little bit sort of heavier, and for not writing on objects, but for writing on things like the mini grip or Ziploc bags to put inventory numbers on and stuff like that. So now it's time to get that packed away. So there we are. We've got our 25 years evolved tool list of things that we take on the road when we go out and survey, maintain, and sometimes repair clocks. As I said, it's no way definitive. It is evolving. There are already things that I forgot that I should have put in there, and maybe things that I think, yeah, maybe they need to be taken off that list. Anyway, hope you found it of interest. Please, as always, let me have your comments below. If you like the content, like and subscribe, and we will see you again soon.